Hello and welcome to Rocking Horse Talk with me, David Kiss. Today we're going to talk about this unusual horse. But before we get stuck into that, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the present owner of the horse for allowing me to have the opportunity to study the horse, as you can see, with its quite unusual mechanism, and also carry out some research before it goes on to pastures new. So yes, thank you very much for allowing me to do that. As some of you are aware, I wrote a book about rocking horses, and one of the main reasons I did that was because there are so many unknown horses out there. We're aware of some of the major names of makers in horses, and they have subsequently been identified, so we know about them. But there are a tremendous amount of makers' names that have come up that we can't really attribute any of their products to, and also a great number of horses, again with the same criteria that we recognise the horses and they have been professionally made, but we can't really attribute them to anyone. So having a horse like this is a good thing to have to try and understand who might possibly have made it. Following my recent bit of research, I've now established the maker of this horse. So basically we can tick just one more off the list of many of the unknown rocking horses that we have. So what we have here is basically a swing stand horse, but it has this really quite strange adaptation on it. This sort of seems to be rods and levers and all sorts of things that don't necessarily immediately make much sense, but hopefully after my talk that'll become clear. As I mentioned earlier, this was at the time an unknown maker, but now I've had a chance to study the horse. Some of this sundry metalwork has actually a name on it, and also a patent number. So from that we can move forward, do some research, and try and establish if it was the actual maker of the horse or just the maker of this device. I've looked into the patent number and have received copies of the original patent that show all the mechanical workings of the horse, and in this it gives a description of what it was about. It says basically the invention relates to certain improvements in hobby horses, rocking chairs, and all similar manufacturers of wood and other suitable materials, and so it goes on. The patent was applied for in 1888, so that's also a really good piece of information. So we can date the horse to that sort of period in time, possibly a little bit later once the patent's been approved. You know, these things always take time. First of all, I'd just like to say that the finish of the horse, this black and white painting, the hair and all of this tack, is much later and not original to the horse. So its appearance originally, when it was first new, would have been somewhat different to it is now. Anyway, that aside, there's still a lot of information with what we have here to help us move forward with the identification. On the inside of the metalwork under here is a maker's name, or certainly our name, which reads Churchward and Co, and also a relevant patent number. So from this, after a little bit of research, I've managed to acquire the patent, as I mentioned, and this also gives us the name of Churchward as well. When I wrote my book, I came across a guy called Churchward, but whether it was the same person or not, you can't just jump to that conclusion. So you need to sort of cross-reference these various points to make sure that the facts are right. On the application for the patent, it refers to John George Churchward. This is one and the same person that I've mentioned in my book. But when we look at the back and we have the illustration of the horse, this is definitely what we've got here. And if one read through all the description of it, which is quite difficult to understand just without an illustration or without the product, it does confirm that although it says Churchward and Co on the metalwork, it is one and the same person. Previously to seeing this horse, I had no idea what Mr. Churchward made, and the only listing I found during my research was, I think, in 1891 to do with Mr. Churchward, and it just listed him as rocking horse maker. Subsequently, I found another listing for him, and it listed him as a builder. Again, around 1890, I think that was what it was. So there was very little information beforehand, but now we have the patent ID about him. We can be pretty certain it is one and the same person, and he was based in 284 Cambridge Road, Hackney, London. Curiously, the first bit of information I found about him gave a slightly different address. I think it was at 280, but what with the patent and a couple of other subsequent discoveries about Mr. Churchward, I'm pretty sure that it was at number 284. Good that we have now taken a horse from the unknown file and can now attribute it to a maker. And also from that, from the general appearance of the horse, although I'd mentioned before it's not in its total original condition, we can also look at other horses and say, yes, we can attribute that also to Mr. Churchward. The subsequent listing I found was, it was from a cutting from the Pall Mall Gazette, 11th of May 1891, and it reads, "Destructive fire in the East End. A destructive fire which attacked 6 different buildings before it was subdued, broke out between 3 and 4 in the morning at 284 Cambridge Road, Mr. Churchward premises. Upon these premises of Mr. J.G. Churchward, builder and rocking horse maker." So there we are. It seems to have been a tremendous fire at his property. So I think, because we've not found any further information about him, and there's so few of what we could now recognise as his horses, I think that really might have been the end of his business. When I applied for the patent, not only did I get this patent, but I also received copies of 2 further, and also an application for another 2 patents. These were all dated, the earliest was dated 1888, so all the information we have about Mr. Churchward seems to be between 1888 and 1891. So I think possibly that was the timeline of his production with regard to rocking horses. There was no mention about him personally with regards to the fire, so I assume that he actually survived it. Otherwise, I feel sure that also would have been reported in the Pall Mall Gazette. So that's probably why this is the only one of these I've ever actually seen in person, and I've been looking at rocking horses for over 40 years now, why they're so thin on the ground. So perhaps his production was limited to just 3 years. I've also curiously had in my possession not that long ago another horse that I feel sure was also made by J.G. Churchward, not on this mechanism but on a conventional swing stand, but the similarities in the horse and the stand design really do lead me to believe that this was a regular swing stand horse. And as you'll see from the picture here, it was originally painted in a brown colour, or a dun, or whatever it would have been described of as in the day. An unusual colouring, but most horses were dapple grey. But again, as I said, I feel sure that this was another one of Mr. Churchward products. I'm also aware of just one other horse, the same as this design. Again, there's a photograph here for you to see, and you can see the striking similarities in the metalwork, although the sand has some slight differences. But these could be attributed to the fact that work has been carried out over the last 100 years or so. You can never be quite sure. That's when I go back to the fact that because the horse is an original in a condition, we have to be still slightly wary of what it was actually have looked like in the first place. But anyway, that's a bit of background about Mr. Churchward and his products, so we can now properly identify them. So now I think we'll talk about the actual mechanics of the horse. You notice the horse, typically a swing stand horse, the hooves are bolted to the rails, but obviously this has all been suspended in the air by this framework here, and also it has this unusual device at the back here. This was basically to give the horse a different rocking motion. So if I start moving a horse about, you can see that the horse is pivoted here. And as you rock it back a long way, it tends to make the horse rear up, which in his description was mentioned about it giving a more lifelike ride for the young jockey at the time. So yeah, that's really quite a novelty and quite a clever thing to come up with. I mentioned he had some other patents as well, and they were similar sort of adaptations of not just rocking horses, but tricycle horses and associated items. So basically we've got a big pivot bolt here, so you know the horse is able to rock about. If I just undo these chains here and unattach those, you can see now the horse is basically, I mean, it pivots on that. In his specification, he also mentioned that the horse could then be fitted to subsequent brackets down here. So now I've attached the brackets to the rails here, to the runners. So now the horse acts in a totally different manner, and it rocks as a conventional swing stand horse would rock, although the horse is still not physically bolted to this and just sort of suspended parallel above it, but it still has, so the horse rocks parallel as a typical swing stand horse. So that was a really clever option to give the new rider. You could either ride it as a conventional horse or have that, as we had in the first place, that more exciting rocking motion, which is I suppose all these things were about novelty and getting additional sales, because at the time, even in 1880, there were a lot of rocking horse makers about. So if you had something special or a bit different, you know, which is still the case today, of course, you know, people always sort of trying to add novelties to various things to increase sales. So possibly that was the reason behind it. But as we all know, Victorians were inventive people. And this was one of those wonderful sort of bizarre things that they came up with in the day. There have been lots of different ways of modifying rocking horses. Some had big springs on them, which gave the horse a strange floating sensation, and the older bow rocking horses, and they all gave a slightly different rock. So this is just one more of those to add to the list, and to my way of thinking, a really clever and novel idea. If we start talking about some actual details of the quality of the horse, I think that would be quite useful. The stand, I think some of it is certainly the metalwork. All this casting, this is all cast metal, and the irons here, that is all, I'm sure, original. The brackets, I'm not 100% on that, but curiously, the brown horse that we illustrated earlier also had the same brackets as that. So I'm not quite sure what to glean from that. They're brass, these brackets, and that was quite an unusual material to choose. Most brackets of that time in the 1880s were some sort of steel or wrought iron or something of that nature. So a little bit of a question mark about the brackets there. Some of the woodwork, again, I don't know. Something tells me some of it's later, something, and I'm really not quite sure. Again, this compares very closely to the horse, the regular swing stand horse on the brown stand. So, and the design in Mr. Churchward's patents, certainly the shaping of the rails is as it was on his design. So if they're not original, they're based on the original. So certainly that's also a key feature of how it was. The stand's been made in the conventional way, posts with wedged spigots at the top and the bottom. Square ends, again the same on the brown horse, that had square ends on the stands. Only chamfered on these little cross pieces and not the base bar, so maybe a slight question as to originality of that, but again very similar to the brown horse. The other horse that I showed you a picture of that's on this metal stand had slightly different posts. It seemed to be square posts, and the stand again was slightly different. I have come across another maker of rocking horses that made exquisite horses, but the stands were always they always seem to be lacking in a certain way. So whether Mr. Churchward just concentrated on the horse and the metal work and outsourced the stands, I don't know. That might have been the case. One thing I didn't mention earlier on was that, well, I did mention that Mr. Churchward was listed as a builder. He's also been listed as a rocking horse maker. In the patent, it lists him as a whitesmith, which is someone who works in metal, like a tinsmith would do. So he seemed to be listed under various trades. So possibly, you know, he was quite an adaptable sort of person. I don't know. So a few areas of doubt about that of the stand. But anyway, in essence, I'm quite pleased that what would have come out the factory would have had this appearance. The horse itself is really quite conventional. The legs, you can see from some slight shadows in the paintwork that they would be mortise and tenon, so a good strong leg. Although in this case, I mean, I know the black ones have to take a bit of weight, but the front ones aren't doing anything. Rocking horses, old horses, always suffered from leg joints coming loose because of the huge forces imparted on them, but certainly this horse would never have any problems with its front legs. So yeah, good quality construction work. Not the finest of carving, but the trouble is, with this later paint, I'm not quite sure what's underneath it. So whether any original carving would have been sanded away. There are bits of paint missing off the back, and I can see that the horse at one time has been almost, well, has certainly been sanded down to the timber, and maybe some of the timber or detailing has been removed. But the head is pleasant enough to look at, so you know, it's quite a finely carved thing, and you know, and to my way of thinking, it's quite an attractive horse. Certainly the paintwork and the harness I don't think are in keeping with the horse, and it would be much improved with a more authentic, although we're not quite sure what it would have been, but I assume a dapple grey on this horse. Maybe it been a brown horse like the other one. But anyway, it would have a totally different appearance, and with the stand cleaned up and a bit of polish applied, again would look totally different again. So in essence, Mr. Churchward seemed to be producing horses of really good quality throughout the design and construction. So yeah. So having said that, one would assume if he'd made a lot of horses, they would have survived. So again, this goes back to what I feel was only a very short manufacturing period of that 3 years up until the fire. You can just imagine that if you've sort of put lots of effort into something and the whole lot was destroyed by fire, especially back in the 1880s, where, you know, it's not quite so easy to start up again, no one's going to subsidise you, etc, etc. So he might well have just chucked the towel in and thought, that's enough, it's enough. I'm not quite sure of his age. I've not looked into any census records about Mr. Churchward at all, and I'm not quite sure of his age when all of this happened. So again, that would be, you know, another avenue to follow to see what that would be. I mean, if the guy was only 30, then maybe he's got lots of years in front of him. But I mean, if he was a bit like me and is sort of retired or getting that way, maybe then, you know, you certainly wouldn't have bothered carrying on much further. So anyway, there we have it. But at least we've got a couple of examples that survive, and now we have, I feel very confident in saying this is a product of Mr. John George Churchward of Hackney. Another one of those unknowns ticked off the list. Just to finalise things, I'm always on the lookout for the unusual or odd. So if you have a horse and you feel that it's still one of those unknown horses, or have information, maybe a family record that your grandfather or whoever it might have been, or even old brochures or catalogues, these little snippets of information are absolutely, truly wonderful. And I'd be grateful if anyone, I mean, I'd always be pleased to receive any information or queries, and I can be contacted on my email at info@rockinghorses.co.uk. So yeah, there we are. So that's another one wrapped up. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye for now.